What the F, man? Everyone wakes up to today, just a normal day, right? You're riding high off a Red Sox victory. Everyone's feeling pretty good. And boom, Patriots to release Stephon Gilmore. Didn't end up being a release. He ended up being traded to Carolina for a 6th-round pick. But what a freaking disaster this situation is. Recapping for everybody at home, he's on the pup. You expect he's coming back, working on a possible contract extension. Who knows? But you're expecting at some point or another, you're going to have your number one corner back on the field playing out the season, and instead gone for virtually nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of us were trying to sleep this morning after being at Fenway Park very late last night on top of the Sunday night football game. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'm getting texts from like you at like, 9:30, 9:30 being like, we need to talk about Gilmore. I'm like, what? And then I looked at my phone and I had a text from a very plugged in NFL source who was actually involved in these negotiations and just straight out told me, hearing Gilmore's going to Green Bay. So, I mean, we could talk about the mechanics of the deal, but just overall, this is just a complete disaster.
How did it get here? Right. It's a
no
disaster. One cares about the deal. How in the world does Bill Belichick get here with this player at this time? Not only getting no return, but not doing something earlier, last year's trade deadline, whenever. I know the injury complicated things, but this is an absolutely blown asset. You get nothing in return, and you don't get the services of the player who is still one of the best players in his position.
It's John, how did we get here? It's another in a long line of Bill Belichick being way, way, way too late than too early. He got to be the best in the business because he was too early on everything.
Sure.
He saw everything ahead of time. Now he's behind. I mean, you go back to Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney was a guy that I was warning for years. You need to take care of him or you need to trade him or else you're not going to get anything. They let Joe Thuney walk and Tom Brady, and he's involved in this too. They let them both walk in the same year that they spend $175 million. So you're not getting any compensatory picks out of either of those deals. You're not even getting comp picks from those. And so, Joe Thuney was way too late. He should have been traded the year before if you knew what was going to happen. Tom Brady, one thing that people don't talk about is the Patriots could have had Tom Brady play his final season under his deal. It was there. It was pennies. It was like $11 million, I think. But they could have made him play for that. Instead, they give him more money. They tack on 2 more dummy years. They add on even more dead cap. And they basically did the same thing almost with Stephon Gilmore. At least now they're letting him play to the end of his deal. But, I mean, he's going to play for somebody else to the end of his deal. And this was Stephon Gilmore. We all know he should have been traded at the trade deadline last year. It was the height of his powers. He was still the reigning defensive player of the year. He was no longer playing that way. We all know he wanted a contract extension, and the Patriots were not going to give it to him. Stephon Gilmore knew the situation, put his house on the market, figured the Patriots aren't idiots. They're going to trade me now. This is when my trade compensation is at the best. And what did they do? They held on to him. He got hurt. Sorry, I don't want to hear any excuse about you couldn't foresee him getting an injury. It's freaking football. It happens. It's part of the calculation. And so he gets hurt. Now you're like, well, now they can't trade him in the offseason. Now what the hell are they going to do? And they just completely screw the pooch. So now they get nothing. They don't, it's just, and now I don't want to, and I also, another thing I don't want to hear is, yeah, well, the secondary did great against Tom, so they don't really need Gilmore. Like, give me a freaking break. If you believe, don't even come in here with that stuff. Like, so what? Let alone that how thin they are right now. Like, okay, maybe they could piece things together right now. What happens if J.C. Jackson gets hurt? What? Now, Jalen Mills, Sean Wade, this new guy that they signed to the practice squad? Like, give me a break. They are in dire straits. They are a worse team today because they don't have Stephon Gilmore, and they got Bupkis to show for it.
Nothing. And that's the thing is, why make excuses for this? Fine, they played okay against Tampa. And given the circumstances, there really was no market for Gilmore. But that's why you trade him early. Like, that's the job. So what I don't get here is, a lot of people assume that the coach / GM is above reproach with all of his personnel decisions, and Bill knows best and this and that, but there's no accountability or transparency with decisions like this. Who's going to question him on it? You think Kraft's going to knock on the door and be like, "Hey, Bill, so what happened there?" Right. It just kind of happens and you move on. But the thing, and again, I don't know of all the reports or whatever it is we fully believe, the fact that it sounds like Gilmore is going to play under his current contract in Carolina when the assumption was he wasn't going to play here until he got a raise starts to make you think he just wasn't playing for this team and this guy here.
Let me explain that. Let me explain all of it. And because I have very good sourcing on this whole thing. And so this is how it went down. So the Patriots yesterday started to make some calls to some friendly people that, hey, you want Gilmore? What will you give? No takers. The Patriots I don't know what they were asking for, but it was a very high bar. So this morning, they got no takers. This morning, they decided to open up the bidding. That's why you leaked the news that you're going to release him at 8 o'clock in the morning, because you have until 4 o'clock. The Patriots thought, so they got some calls, maybe talk some parameters, but the Patriots still had a high bar. They were basically bluffing. They thought somebody was going to get desperate, that somebody else was going to jump in ahead of them, and they would get decent compensation, probably around the 3 to 4 range. Didn't happen. The clock was ticking. The Patriots knew it, and so they basically went back to a team that they had heard from early on in Carolina, and they took what Carolina's offer, which was a 6th-round pick. As far as I know, and this is going off of league sources who were involved in this, they think that was the only offer that the Patriots got on Stephon Gilmore. So the Patriots tried to bluff their way to more compensation. It didn't happen. Now, on Gilmore, I am told from an excellent source on this, again, involved in these negotiations, because I asked the question too. I was like, well, so is he getting a bump in pay? Is he getting a contract extension? That's the only way that, that he would okay. Well, I mean, Stephon's going back home, but that's a piece that he wanted to, and that's why he wouldn't be here anymore. And they're like, nope, no bump, no contract extension. And I was told, as far as they knew, Stephon Gilmore was open to the same sort of scenario with the Patriots, which basically the Panthers have said, yeah, if things go well, we'll be interested in talking a contract extension with you in the offseason. Gilmore got none of that from the Patriots. The Patriots were not entertaining a contract extension after the season. They basically wanted the half-season rental. They wanted to move on after that. Gilmore was not interested in that. He wouldn't play ball and renegotiate his contract to give them more cap space. And so there you have the trade.
But just that, again, is more infuriating if you're a Patriots fan,
it's damning to the Patriots. He's playing under the same contract. He's doing it for somebody else.
Same thing, just not here. And that's the biggest kick in the, of all of it. If it's an untenable situation or there's a reason you have to do it for X, Y, and Z, this did not have to happen. So this one's going to be really hard to swallow. And how many of these types of situations that you've listed, a whole bunch of them earlier, can they continue to have with not just players, like their best players, where you're losing the player and you're getting nothing, and it's all based on no give and take, hardline stances, interpersonal skills? I have no idea, but it's just shocking that it gets to this point.
And John, let's take it a step further. They're still screwed at the cornerback position.
Sure, because you got to find that money and pay somebody. You got to pay JC.
Now, well, I mean, who knows? They don't even have all that much money next year because of what they did this year.
Sure.
And who knows? Maybe some of the free agents don't even work out, and they try to cut bait and they incur more dead cap. Whatever. But just putting that aside, so Stephon Gilmore's gone. You figured at the worst, the Patriots could go to the end of this and threaten to either tag Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson after the season to assure themselves of one franchise cornerback. And you figured it would be J.C. Jackson. He's younger. Let Stephon move on, what have you. Now Stephon's gone. Now J.C. Jackson has all the leverage. Now the Patriots have no choice but to franchise him. If you're J.C. Jackson's agent, and I looked at the projected cap number, the projected franchise tag for cornerback next year is almost $18 million. Okay? So if and say the Patriots play this out, because this is what the teams do, this is what the agents do. So $18 million for year one. If the Patriots don't want to lose that asset, they're going to have to tag them again. That's $22 million in the second year. So that's basically, let's call it $40 million. Yeah, $40 million for 2 years for J.C. Jackson. If I am his agent and the Patriots come to me on a contract extension, that is where I start.
Right.
$40 million guaranteed the first 2 years, because that's the corner that they have painted themselves into. And so they continue to be screwed at the cornerback position. There are no other cornerbacks in the pipeline. That's probably why they traded for Shaun Wade from the Ravens. We don't even know whether he can play. He has not been active yet, but that's where they are. They paint themselves in the corner, and they don't have a number. John, I was excited. One of the things I was optimistic about at 1-3 was, okay, if they can go through this, whatever, then they get Stephon Gilmore back. All right. Now you add in Jamie Collins. He'll help a little bit. Okay. And the guys are getting better. Now I can see it. Now, no Stephon Gilmore in week 7 or 8. Dude, that's not good. It's not good at all.
No, this is a massive step back in a lot of ways. And again, just head scratching. I all day long, it hasn't gotten any better or any clearer or just a botch, just a miss. I don't know. You said it 100 different ways, so I don't know how else to put it here.
John, one thing I just wanted to explain, because I'm sure people were following my tweets today.
Yeah.
And early on, I said I'd be shocked if Gilmore wasn't traded. This is after
I was following that, and then they
Schefter said he's going to be released. I said he's shocked. I'd be shocked that if he wasn't traded, which he was, and I said that the favorites in league circles was the Packers. So just to explain that, along with the whole scenario that I laid out before. So let's just say, for hypothetical reasons, you're a team that's interested in acquiring a cornerback like Stephon Gilmore. So you call the Patriots are asking for the moon, say a 3rd round pick. And they're like, screw that. We'll just wait till he's released. You call the agent. You're like, we're not paying what Bill wants. Like, that's not happening. So how are we looking if this does ultimately be a release, that they don't get any takers on their offer? And the agent was telling people, we're going to Green Bay. Green Bay is looking good, so I wouldn't waste yourself. So that's where it was. And the Packers did not want to step up and make a deal. The Panthers were the only team that made a deal. For Stephon Gilmore, it made sense. He's going home, basically, at least for the balance of this season. And so that's how we ended up where we were. So I just wanted to.
Yeah. It just seems silly that Green Bay wouldn't step up in terms of.
Yes, it does.
Such meager compensation.